Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, I guess.
Yep.
Have, hope you'll have a good lunch. My name is Dragos Drake. I'm your host for today, for this lunch. I want to start by thanking very much Maria Rosa and the EIF for giving me the opportunity, together with them, to organize this debate on a topic that I'm sure you'll agree with me. If you are in this room, I'm sure you are somewhat affected or interested. A topic which until some months ago was almost not at all present in the debate. And again, I'm sure, since you are working or interested in this sector, you know it well too well. The Commission didn't say anything or didn't think of it at the time of their proposal. The Council didn't think of it. They didn't include it in their mandate. It was actually in this House, and I say it with a lot of pride, not for myself, but for this House, that considered, and not now with ChatGPT in the last 6 months, but already a year ago or longer, considered that the creative industry and the impact of AI on creativity is something that we cannot miss in our attempt to bring in rules. Because I think that unlike pretty much every other industrial revolution in our history, AI is the first one that actually challenges something that we thought only belonged to us as humans, which is creativity. So until now, the steam engine, the robots, any other piece of technology that revolutionized different sectors in our economies or in our societies, they have never challenged this. They have never challenged our monopoly on thought, our monopoly on creation, on creativity. But AI now does that. And I think because it does that, and because I think we all agree this is something that we hold very dear, and we believe that this is the value added that we have on any other piece of machine or technology, we need to make sure that we do this right. We need to make sure that we are putting the right guardrails in place so that, again, this monopoly remains, at least to a certain extent, a monopoly of ours. And that it will still be able to be the determining factor in any piece of creation. And we also have to accept the fact that, yes, AI is going to be a player in the area of creating things, from art to science, but we'll have to see how we harness that potential, because it is a potential. It is a potential that can do also a lot of good and accelerate a lot of things around us. But again, at the same time, we have to make sure that we put the right rules in place to still give us that edge where we can bring our humanity to bear in the way this technology will evolve. Is what we did in the regulation so far enough? I hear voices that says both yes and no. Some say, ooh-ha, you've hit the nail with your rules. Others say it's not enough. Others say it's going too far. So at least what I hope to get out of today's discussion is a more educated view at the end of the debate as to whether we've gone too far, whether we've gone too little, what else we could still do, because we could still influence, and you can still, with your thoughts and ideas, influence our debate. Yes, it's true that we are now in the final leg of this negotiation. We have started now trilogues, but this area, because the Council had not put anything in their proposal, this area will be one of those which will be open and is still open for tweaking. So we can still work on this to make sure, again, that we are putting the rules exactly where they need to be. Do we need consent from the authors before we allow an algorithm developer to use our work in the training of the algorithm? That's a question that I got just this morning from talking to some business representatives who are saying, well, in fact, we believe, some part of the industry says, we believe that we should not. Others say we believe you should. So again, let's have this debate today. It is Chatham House, so we can say what goes through our minds, through our hearts, through our souls, what is in the interests of the creative industry, but also we will have developers of foundational models that are going to also help us and bring their perspective on things. Because the one thing that we do not want to do with the rules is also put unnecessary barriers to development of AI. Some say, at the end of the day, an AI algorithm is like a human brain, right? That's why it's called artificial intelligence. And just as a human brain is being exposed all the time to things around it, right? If I decide to write a novel tomorrow, I have read many books before. I'm not asking the authors of those books whether it's okay to read their books. And I'm going to write a book tomorrow. How will we determine whether my writing of that book is infringing the rights of all the other authors that I have read? It is in the content. So if those authors that I read would consider that what I did copies too much their work, then they would be activating their rights and coming and chase. That's pretty much the logic that we have followed with our text. That's why we brought in the proposal, the idea of transparency of copyrighted material. But there were voices in Parliament who said we should go one step further. We should actually ask for express consent. But am I, as a human creator, asking for the express consent of the other creative or scientific work that I am being exposed to? I'm not, unless I replicate too much what I see and what I read. So again, it's a very important debate, this one, because again, the way we will write the rules is going to determine how also this sector will evolve and how much AI is going to be a good part of it or a bad part of it. And certainly, I'm hoping that by listening to the experts that have agreed to be with us today, and I thank them already in advance for doing so, I hope that we're going to be at the end of this lunch better prepared. Certainly, I hope that I'm going to get some good insights from this debate, because in the weeks to come, with Dan over here, who is going to work 10 hours, 12 hours a day to get this right. I'm hoping that, again, we're going to get those ideas that will help us at the end of the negotiation to have a good text. So, some rules of the game for today. We have a list of 6 speakers. I will kindly ask them to keep it short in their initial remarks. I will ask them to pass one by one here at the mic first for their 3-4 minutes introductions. And then we will all go sit, and we will be taking questions from the room. There will be mics going around the room, so if you have questions afterwards while you eat your lunch, raise those questions, and us from over here will try to answer them. Of course, myself, if you have questions to me, I'll also be happy to answer them. But I think most importantly is that we hear from our experts who do bring, I think, the best of perspectives from the creative industry. And we have Brigitte Vezina, Director of Policy and Open Culture at Creative Commons, Quentin de Chandelier, Legal Advisor, Federation of European Publishers, Tom Chetfield, author and tech philosopher, Grégoire Pollade, Director General for the Association of Commercial Television and Video on Demand Services in Europe, ACT, Ben Brooks, online, representing Head of Public Policy, Stability AI, and John Fallon, Director General, ICMP. So different perspectives on the topic, all of them, I'm sure, enriching for our discussion, for our topic of the day. So with that, I give the floor first to Brigitte. Please come over here.
Well, good afternoon. Many thanks to the organizers at EIF for having me, and to MEP Tudorache for hosting this panel. So my name is Brigitte Vezina. I'm Director of Policy and Open Culture at Creative Commons. We are a global nonprofit organization, the one behind the widely used Creative Commons licenses. And for many years now, we've been examining the interplay between copyright and artificial intelligence. Why? Because we want to explore the ways that could help people build on and contribute to the commons. How this technology could actually stimulate new creativity, but also foster better sharing of knowledge and culture. And by better, we mean sharing that is inclusive, equitable, reciprocal, and sustainable. So I only have 3 minutes, so I'll emphasize 3 points. First is that generally, generative AI training should be permissible without copyright permission. Why? Because we all agree that all creativity builds on the past. And so copyright as a system should continue to leave room for people to study and learn from past works to create new ones, including by analyzing past works through automated means. How can that be achieved? There's already a system in place, and that is under Articles 3 and 4 of the DSM Directive, the Copyright in the Digital Single Market Directive, which includes an opt-out. The second point is that copyright protection over AI-generated outputs could be protected by copyright, provided there is sufficient human creative input. Again, we see AI as a tool to assist, to support, to enhance human creativity and artists, and not to replicate, undermine, or replace them. So, when looking at cases of protectability, we just need to rely on, and where necessary, clarify the copyright protectability criteria. Last point is that infringement of the outputs generated through AI should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, respectful of copyright exceptions. We need, as in any other case, to balance the interests of rights holders with those of users and AI developers. Copyright is a cornerstone of the fundamental right of freedom of expression. So we need to protect the legitimate uses, including private uses or uses that are quote unquote transformative, and ensure that they are legally allowed under exceptions. So to conclude, it's important to remember that copyright is an important, but is not the only lens to think about AI. There are many other legal regimes that can address AI's serious concerns, like privacy, safety, transparency, as the AI Act currently does. There is also norms and standards emerging in community practice that we can look to, like opt-outs, which are being developed, or the development of curated data sets, including openly licensed content for training. So going forward, it's clear that a diverse community of people must be involved in guiding the regulation of generative AI, with expertise spanning the fields of copyright, certainly, but also ethics, privacy, data protection, fundamental rights, so that AI's promises are fulfilled and its perils averted. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Quentin Deschandelier. I'm the legal advisor at the Federation of European Publishers. So we represent book publishing, the Book Publishing Association across Europe. So we are the voice of publishers in Europe. And I have to say, book publishing is the biggest creative sector in Europe. Of course, thank you first to EIF and to Mr. Tudorake for organizing this very timely debate on this core issue that is occupying a lot of discussion, to say the least, these days. How do we, as publishers, approach the topic? Publishing sector sees AI as an opportunity in many different areas, whether it is to anticipate demand, make our books accessible for people with disabilities, optimize production processes, etc. So in short, we're not Luddites, definitely not, the contrary. But generative AI poses significant problems, particularly in terms of copyright. And the AI Act gives an opportunity to address some of these challenges without needing to reopen copyright rules. Copyright rules, of course, apply to generative AI. Just like Brigitte said, in the EU, we have already a legal framework, which is the text and data mining exception that was designed with AI in mind. However, there's two conditions that go with this exception. First, you need to have a legal access to the content that you mine, and B, you need to, the right holders have the right to opt out their works from such mining, for instance, to train a generative AI. So we need to make this exception and its condition work now. A working opt-out system is fundamental because not only does it allow to protect works, but also it gives a condition to publishers and writers at large to potentially develop licenses that will help AI developers to get access to quality data to train the AI, and for authors and right holders to be remunerated for such uses. FEP, as far as we're concerned, we have supported the development of a machine-readable opt-out, which within an international organization that develops standards, W3C, and now with a few lines of code, right holders can tell an AI crawler that their website cannot be mined, and they can also redirect the crawler towards a license. In terms of copyright in generative AI, there are, let's say, two areas of concerns. The input, so what is used to train an AI, and the output, what comes out of a generative AI. On the input side, the core issue is to ensure that the data used to train an AI is legal. Today, from the little glimpse that we can get, hundreds of thousands of books collected from pirate websites are used to train AI. As for the opt-out that I mentioned earlier, right holders don't get a notification when their work is being mined, so we have no clue whether the opt-out is actually respected. On the output side, the problem is whether there is copyright eligibility for what comes out of an AI and the impact it has on authors and the market. In principle, a fully AI-generated content should not be eligible for copyright because only human creation can be eligible to it. As for authors, which are arguably very important in this discussion, an AI that is instructed to copy their style could very well infringe their moral rights and their personality rights. Also, it can flood the market, decreasing the value of past and future work of the author in question. On Amazon today already, we see large numbers of AI-generated children's books that are flooding the market. So it's a concrete reality that it's not science fiction. What's the answer to this? Transparency is a fundamental answer to this, to answer some of the challenges. And that's where the AI Act can and must make a difference. For starters, there must be transparency when the work is fully generated by AI, so that consumers know about it. But we also need urgently to address the growing issue that generative AI training datasets are black boxes. Nobody knows what's in there. The Parliament already made a very good first step by introducing transparency obligation on the training datasets of this generative AI. It's a good first step, but it's not enough. A summary of what copyright works are used in this training dataset is not enough because it's too vague and it's easy to circumvent. Either you know what is in there or you don't. Without meaningful transparency obligations that will allow right holders to know if their works were used in the training datasets, opt-outs will not be worth the paper they're written on. And why? Because in the end, that would mean that it will be all too easy to ignore the opt-outs without consequences. And if opt-outs become toothless, why would an AI actor ever pay for a license? On top of that, not only do we need to know what works are in the training datasets, but we need to know where they were collected from to avoid pirate websites being used as sources to train AI. To finish, and more generally, letting the approach break things and ask for forgiveness later is not an approach that should prevail when talking about generative AI. It's not sustainable. Innovation must be supported, no debate about that. But culture and right holders cannot be the sacrificial lamb over innovation. And the AI Act is the opportunity to achieve this balance between innovation and the respect to copyright. All we need to start is a bit of transparency. Thank you, and looking forward for the conversation.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm an author and a philosopher, which means I'm both speaking for myself and providing a voice of those who try to make a living through words and ideas and creative acts. And what I want to bring is the vision of several possible futures. There is nothing inevitable about what happens next. There is nothing inevitable about the direction that technology takes. We have control. Human history is the history of a series of negotiations with technology and decisions made in rooms like this about which values we wish to enshrine in technology and why and how. There is right now a vision of the future brewing in which tidal waves of undifferentiated algorithmic content pour out across the world, and AI systems are then trained upon their own outputs, reducing large sectors of the cultural landscape to a mush of undifferentiated, semi-truthful, indistinguishable nonsense. AIs are supremely powerful technologies because they feed off human works and human self-understandings. They're a tremendous gift to the world because without AIs, we cannot hope to understand or harness the power of big data, of an algorithmic world. But, and this is a point I think is hugely important, the value of art and creativity is not captured by a description of its outputs. The processes that go into it are the ones that matter to the health of a society and a democracy. I'm using words here. We will be using words and ideas to debate the meaning of concepts, what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is significant. Our ability and the ability of our children and our citizens to use words to scrutinize reality, to tell stories of value and purpose, this is incredibly precious and integral to the health of a society. Truth, transparency, and trust go together. AIs are not of this world. They exist in a world of data. Their power, which is enormous, is also their limitation, in that they will endlessly produce statistically plausible responses to an input. This is a tremendous gift, but it is up to us to anchor it to reality and to certain values and principles that we wish to defend. And I would make the case that the values we need to defend include, as has been said, a basic principle that if I am to trust a system, I must know how it is being trained and upon what. If I am to trust an output, I must know whether it is the product of a machine, a human, or some combination of the both. And if I am to try to help the world think, to tell stories, to help a society and the next generation learn what it means to live in a society, I must be able to tell my story and speak my words and control the life of those words in the world. I must be able to deny permission if I wish. The careers through which creativity is preserved, through which we make livings, are not just ornaments to society. They're not just nice things that we can have or not have or replace with AI. They're an integral part of the human business of self-scrutiny and self-knowledge and democratic debate. We cannot afford to hollow out the means through which people build and sustain livings in these areas. And AI should not force us to do these things. It should be a gift to our self-understanding. But, and this is the point I want to leave you with, humans are the beginning and the end of everything that matters in this space. We are the source of the language, the data, the understandings, the values, and the purposes. AIs are not some abstract magical thing. They are machines built by corporations and individuals in particular places, in particular times, for particular purposes. And in the case of large language models, the labor of tens of thousands of people, often in the global south, is auditing and reviewing what goes into them to try to make them adherent to basic social norms. They are social artifacts. They are not magic. They are not intelligent. They are potent. And the outputs they produce are not to be measured by some abstract idea of progress. They are to be evaluated by how they serve society, the coming generation, the things that we believe are good and worth living for and true and beautiful and important. So we must be unafraid to judge, to regulate and to intervene in the service of these values. Truth, transparency and trust are integral to the health of democracy and art and society. And I hope they will continue to be defended. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, well, good afternoon. I want to give you food for thought, but I want you to have food too, so please start. Don't worry, I think I'll be repeating quite a few points. Dear MEPs, EIF members, MEP Tudorache, fellow EIF board members, distinguished audience, it's my pleasure to share very initial views from the TV and VOD sector on this hot topic that's certainly going to occupy a lot of our time in the coming years. So I wasn't sure if I should add a disclaimer here that this statement was written by a human. I don't know if it's a joke today or a reality tomorrow, but certainly that's one and many other things that will be considering. And of course, the AV sector is in full reflection mode as to the impact and policy implications of AI. The European Union, as noted, is distinguishing itself by tackling the subject early and setting some standards. And this is why discussions in this House, as just highlighted, are so important, as they will clearly set the tone for what happens worldwide. So don't underestimate an EIF lunch. It's always very important. And with it, what happens when the AI revolution impacts Europe's creative and cultural industries, which I remind you are a leading driver of GDP and employment across the EU. The AV sector has and will continue to be at the forefront of Europe's digital transformation. And for every new technological wave, the industry has evolved and will take strong views as to the threats and opportunities to ensure a creative ecosystem that is sustainable. Practically, there will obviously be necessary nuances in approach at policy level. Our members are already today making use of AI solutions from post-production, for example, visual effects, color adjustment, de-aging. You might have seen some actors that look really young compared to their real age, to marketing or archive management, or entirely new bespoke interactive experiences for audiences. So when it comes to the AI Act, we believe in the important values of disclosure and transparency, especially when it comes to AI generative content that is hyper-realistic and that may deceive audiences. But on the other hand, it's important that legislators draw the line, where the content is clearly and obviously fictional, or where editorial responsibility is involved. But it also means adherence to fundamental principles, which we've heard about, in order to address upcoming threats. Principles that allow for reinvestment and value creation, of course for the sustainability of the industries I represent, but for existential rules tied to media pluralism, to ensure that quality news is not drowned out, that democratic discourse is upheld, and privacy and property rights protected. The lesson there is that all technologies, either existent or emergent, can and should be obliged to comply with our fundamental values, such as the ones enshrined in Articles 11, 13, 16, and 17 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and that any technology should be designed to uphold such values and freedoms. As regards copyright specifically, intellectual property is a key, if not the key, foundation of the media ecosystem. It's how commercial players such as ourselves reinvest up to 25 billion each year in Europe and keep millions of creatives employed, and Europe as a leader in the AV global content race. From this perspective, ACT looks at the present and future discussions on AI and copyright in view of the instruments that exist, of course, and whether they will be sufficient to ensure IP rights are protected and upheld in this new context. And these bring up a lot of answers, but also a lot of questions. The first one, and the most obvious, as was already said, is the text and data mining exemption for commercial uses of copyright in the DSM directive. Article 4 of this directive clearly states that all content that is publicly available and was accessed lawfully can make the object of the TDM exemption, unless the owner of the content has specifically reserved their rights. The reservation can take place through many means, including a disclaimer on the website, but even the 2019 Copyright Directive implied that the safest bet is to reserve the rights in machine-readable format, and I see our friends from the book sector have done exactly that. But does that make us really safe? Once we've reserved our right, the reserved content cannot be used for deep language learning? It's not so straightforward, and there's a lot of arguments going back and forth on this. Neither is it so clear-cut from a technological perspective whether reserving the rights could have any unforeseen effects on distribution, for example, indexation in search engines or other systems. The second important point is related to exemptions, and particularly to the pastiche exemption. As many legal scholars out there know, the 2001 InfoSoc Directive provides a basic layer of protection for copyrighted work. Article 5 sets out exceptions for a pastiche that could be invoked by the developers of generative AI tools in the context of their activities. This, in practice, enables the creation of works based on the reuse of pre-existing works. So lots of questions in that field too. And finally, I think we need to also keep in mind, although we are leading in this discussion here in Brussels, with what's happening in the US, on copyright issues, particularly considering the development of generative AI, the limits of the fair use exemption there are being tested. We know that there are some lawsuits that will define these limits in light of new technologies, and the limits again will be tested with regard to input data, how much and to what extent. I think on the output data, the situation appears to be simpler, as in a recent decision by the US Copyright Office, it is made clear that AI-generated works cannot benefit from protection. Will this doctrine prevail elsewhere? So these are some of the current reflection points for us and many others as we look at existing and new policies and how they apply to the value chain from creation to production to distribution and to further exploitation of AV content. This House will no doubt look at all these questions in detail to ensure that we can continue to reinvest as we do in content for the benefit of millions of European viewers and, of course, to support our fundamental goals with regard to media pluralism and cultural diversity. Thank you very much. Enjoy your meal.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, my thanks to the entire EIF team, and may I extend particular thanks to MEP Dragos Tudorache, not only for hosting today's fruitful discussions, but also his leadership in this absolutely critical legislative dossier. Brevity being an uncommon Irish trait, and today's time limit of 3 minutes being what it is, forgive me for diving straight into some headlines from our sector. ICMP represents major and independent music companies in 76 different national trade associations across 6 continents, and in aggregate, we defend the rights surrounding approximately 90% of the world's commercially released music. Today, that's more than 100 million music tracks, from Beethoven to Beyoncé, Schubert to Ed Sheeran, and the Beatles to BTS. At its core, our industry does 2 things. It invests multi-billion euro annually in the creation of music. Secondly, it brings the world's music to a global audience of billions via licensed models of each format, including digital audio and video streaming, physical, film, broadcast, and of course through emerging technologies. It must be recalled that artificial intelligence services are very far from new. Our sector has utilized AI on a B2C level for many years, for example, streaming playlists or music remixing. We also do it on a B2B level, for example, AI services, which help commercial licensees to navigate our repertoire databases, to licensing administration, and even today, AI services which help tackle AI infringements. Generative AI is also far from new. For example, in 2019, AI was used to generate an entire song and indeed an entire music video for the US rapper Travis Scott. And yes, they did nickname it Travis Bot. With this in mind, I always emphasize that it is vital to define what we mean by AI and specifically by AI music before any meaningful discussion or decision can be taken. Take the example of entire albums of fake Drake, which you may have been reading and hearing about. The backing beat and the lyrics were written by a human, the vocal was even recorded by a human, the AI tools were used to convert the vocal to a sound-alike. There's a significant legal and operational difference between this form of AI technology and purely machine-generated works. So careful distinction and definition is vital, for it informs correct responses. However, what is new in the area of AI is the sheer scale and speed with which AI can scrape or ingest entire databases of copyright-protected works in order to ingest or output content. These emerging uses create new and exciting opportunities for the music industry. Safe to say, we all here in this room and further afield as music fans can expect new AI-supported music performances of our favourite artists in mixed reality hardware, the metaverse, and future engagement methods. This will create work, rights, and revenue for artists. However, there are serious challenges on ingestion and output, and the EU AI Act presents an opportunity for solutions. Take the generative AI startup Boomi, which uploaded large amounts of machine-generated music to Spotify recently. Many tens of thousands of these works had to be removed due to their infringing nature. Our sector will continue to unapologetically enforce our writers' moral rights in the digital marketplace. These unlicensed uses are reflected in several generative AI-related cases being taken at the current point. There's been passing reference to the US, where the Warhol Foundation case gave a key landmark decision about derivative use and fair use in the US, in a very helpful decision just a fortnight ago. There are ongoing cases in the UK with Getty Images and in California with the GitHub cases, which will be crucial. At its core, copyright is about rights and revenue. If AI companies wish to use the work of the world's songwriters and composers, they should be able to. Music is inherently collaborative and progressive, but it is utterly critical that they do so with permission. thereby respecting existing EU laws, exclusive rights, and contributing to the EU economy. If I want to make a painting, I cannot and should not expect to acquire the paint for free. We should not have to chase that permission on behalf of our writers after the fact of use. Thanks to recent EU legislation, many companies have realised that this is not the way to do business. In the words of the UK High Court last year, in its broadest sense, IP is doing its job most acutely when it is in a David and Goliath situation. The point of a property right is that others do not get to trespass on your property. It is still a trespass whether the owner of the property is a prince or a pauper. So to conclude, for the EU AI Act, securing right holder permission is key, particularly for Europe's SMEs and small businesses and startups. Detailed recording of the usage of works and data sets is not only possible, it's basic business practice. AI companies should not get a free pass in this regard. We encourage the EU to secure dataset usage and transparency obligations in the final text. As has been said by our colleagues in the book sector, there has been great steps taken thus far in the Parliament's texts, and we applaud that, but we do need to beef up those transparency provisions. Fully AI-generated works should be labelled as such to prevent harm to consumers and the digital single marketplace in the interests of transparency. And copyright exceptions, such as those for text and data mining, are precisely that, exceptional in their need and in their scope. International law, specifically the Berne Convention, plays a key role here. So achieving all this is not beyond the wit of man, nor of AI companies, and I agree with Sam Altman of OpenAI when he says we should not anthropomorphize AI. It is a tool, one requiring human decisions, directions, and prompts. These directions bring responsibilities. So how we use it and how we regulate the uses, not the technology, but the uses of AI, that will shape the future of many sectors. AI won't kill music, but unlicensed music may. In a world wherein the US says that without human direct intervention, a work may not be copyrightable, and in China, where their draft AI laws propose copyright protection due to software development, and in the UK, which is considering highly harmful text and data mining and copyright exceptions, the EU must take the geopolitical lead. Executive Vice President Vestager said it succinctly in yesterday's meeting. No one should take excessive risks to get ahead in the innovation race. The EU must not just be the first to regulate, it must also set the global gold standard, and we encourage them to take that opportunity. So to that end, ICMP looks forward to the trilogue process and wishes Mr. Tudorache and all of the co-legislators every success as they conclude negotiations. Thank you very much.